Before the success stories, the progress, there was you. You who made a choice to grow, to inspire, to overcome your own challenges. At NASM, we're in service of your limitless potential because when you keep growing, we all get stronger, and we'll never stop making your journey our mission. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified personal trainer.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts, here with my friend and co-host, as always, Ken Miller. How are you?
Great, Wendy. How you doing? Your hair's looking awesome.
Oh, well, thanks. I actually did it just for you. Today, we are talking about Moneyball, but not just Moneyball, the movie, or Moneyball, the book. If you guys had the chance to see the movie with Brad Pitt, Brad Pitt, Chris Pratt, and Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill.
It was so good. But there was a book that came out in, I think, 2003 by Michael Lewis, and it was called Moneyball, and it was about the Oakland A's and in their 2002 season, how they kind of changed the dynamics, and they had their manager hire someone that looked at metrics because of their finances, and they built a team off of numbers versus what the scouts would normally go do, which is watch them play. And so we wanted to talk about Moneyball for fitness, because just like in the movie or the book, there were some people that were undervalued based on maybe their performance that one scout saw. However, when they put them on the team, they saw that they were the ones that should have been super valued and were the ones that actually helped them win. So I think when we're looking at today, we're talking about undervalued exercises and then the overvalued exercises. What are the ones we always hear about? And, maybe we need to find a balance.
Yeah, I didn't want this to turn into a movie review. We're not Cisco.
Oh, it's such a good movie, y'all.
It's a great movie. Now, one of the reasons why I like it so much, and Billy Beane, who was the GM at the time, he actually graduated from the same high school that I graduated from down in San Diego. So I was like, oh, fellow Sun Devil, Billy Beane. But the as I watched, it just happened to be on TV where I was flipping through Netflix or something, and I just saw it, and I haven't seen this movie in a while, so I'm going to watch it. But the part, if you decide to watch this movie after this episode, I encourage you to watch the scene where they've got all the scouts, they're in the room, and they're talking about these players, right? These players, this guy's he's going to be a good player. He's got a really good swing. He's got a nice square jaw. So they're talking about these random aspects about these players. Good swing, tall, big guy, good square cut jaw. And from there, you look at how are these scouts? These are paid scouts from the organization that go out all over the country. They're watching high school games, they're watching college games, they're looking at other baseball teams and who's playing for other teams. But you look at some of the you listen to the comments that they're making and how they're evaluating how good somebody is as a baseball player by the way their face looks, they're tall, their dimensions, the way their swing looks, which is very, very subjective when it comes to looking at player performance. So what that made Billy Beane do was evaluate how are we looking, what are the objective ways of looking at how good somebody actually is. And that's the part that caught my eye when it came to the movie, because then you just think, well, we do the same thing with exercises. We look at exercises, say you look at who's performing the exercise and the ease in which they may be doing it, and therefore it's a great exercise and something that can translate to me or me and my buddy who might be my workout partner, or me and my clients who might have the same goal as this other person. But are we really making fair an equitable judgment on the return on investment when we look at our selection of exercises. So that's what we want you to walk away with from listening to this episode of Random Fit on Moneyball for Fitness. Are we fairly evaluating exercises for the perceived benefit that they offer us? So just like Billy Beane did with the 2002 Oakland A's, and looking at, okay, who's, like you said, Wendy, who's overvalued and undervalued, meaning undervalued, I mean, we look like we're going to get a certain amount, but we're actually getting a lot more from an exercise versus those that we think, oh, I'm going to get huge glutes, big thighs, strong press, whatever. But that may be a little bit too much of an ask from a certain exercise. So I like the perspective we're taking when it comes to exercise evaluation, just like they did with
Well, and I think too, we need to think about this. We talk about the importance of assessments all the time. We're getting the same type of analytics and data points, just like these guys were in baseball, but it may be different on what we're looking at. So I'm looking at transitional movement patterns, meaning the overhead squat, maybe your single leg squat, different types of movement that you do dynamically with just your body weight. And how do you handle that in comparison? If I start you in ideal position, where do you deviate, or do you deviate? So that information to me is going to be really important, because as I'm designing a program, I want to fix anything I may see that may not be optimal. So therefore, you're going to be able to lift more and be more powerful in everything else that you do. So when you're looking at, there's also the subjective information that I'm just looking at different things. I can also get objective information, which is like stats based on different measurements, your time, how fast you were, and different, how do you move in different types of directions? How quick can you change positions? That's all based on time. So there's assessments, there's tests, and all of that information is data for me. Now, like you said, if somebody comes in and they have a forward head and rounded shoulders, and all they want to do, and we talked about this on another show on Mondays, is do chest, and they like to do a bunch of chest presses with the bar, they load it heavy, they only go through a short range of motion, and then they do a lot of other chest exercises. For someone with those compensation patterns, they're not lifting to their full potential, and they're actually increasing chances of injury to the rotator cuff because of the forward position of the bone in the shoulder capsule, so the humerus in the shoulder capsule. So that's very techie. But what I would say is, if I saw that, just like when they were looking at numbers, I could say that wouldn't be the best exercise for you at this time. But if we do some exercises to bring your shoulders in a better, safer position by doing some back or things for the back side of you, then we're going to have better alignment. So you're going to be able to do even more weight than you're doing now. And so the chest, I think, is a highly overvalued exercise, like a chest press, like a barbell chest press, highly overvalued, especially when most people come in with those compensations that I just discussed a minute ago.
Yep. And the pushing, the bench press being the quote unquote king of pressing exercises, that's one that, if you are evaluating for strength, that is an assessment. But as an exercise, to do it every Monday, like what we like to joke about with Monday being International Chest Day, they might do it maybe once, maybe two more times in that week, which makes it a very, very dominant exercise selection wise, but very low in return, because it is a one-trick pony, right? So if we're looking at somebody who likes to, baseball wise, they like to swing for the fences, and they're known for getting a lot of home runs, let's say Barry Bonds. The other thing you have to look at is, how often do they get on base? Are they a good slugger? Are they getting multiple bases in hit? What's their RBI? So they may have a really good, very fancy, sexy statistic, like I bench 410 pounds. I don't do that. But if somebody had that really, really big number when it comes to bench press, it's impressive. But if that's all you got, then it's not really doing that much for you from if we talk about bench relative to other ways that we can challenge the pushing motion, which again, a lot of guys like to do that because you're getting the big chest, very impressive. You can see it in the mirror, right? Which brings on one of the jokes of why don't a lot of guys like to do back days? Well, you can't see it in the mirror. So when we talk about bench press being very, very overvalued, that's an understatement because you don't get a whole lot from it as an exercise because it's just one motion, one hand position fixed on a bar, and we're not really challenging the shoulder. But the threat to the body there is the fact that, you know what, if you're performing that one exercise with poor form, it's only going to make things worse for you over time.
Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about the hitters, it's also about the type. This is what I love with scouts. And I know this because of my past in baseball. When scouts are like, oh, he's amazing, he hits home run after home run. They actually have this in one of the movies as well, where I'm like, that is spot on. That one home run hitter may nail a right-handed fastball each and every time, but you throw him a curve, a knuckle, something else, something that's not the typical straight just dart, they miss every time. So when we're looking and talking about the differences, just know, I think the chest press, barbell chest press is great. But as Marty Miller always says, earn the right because you've got good shoulder mobility to be able to use that bar. So if we did something like a single arm chest press with a dumbbell, I put you on a cable, I changed your positions, I alternated different type of chest movement patterns. I did flies one day. I'm doing different things and really focusing on the posterior side to make sure that I've got good movement quality. Then I would say bench press all you want. It's a great exercise, but from the start, highly overrated. Highly overrated.
So let's talk about, let's go the other end of the spectrum with an underrated or undervalued exercise. And one of those exercises is the dead bug. Mm-hmm. Dead bug, which is basically if you can imagine, you're laying on the floor on your back. You've got your arms and your knees extending up towards the ceiling. So your knees will be bent, but you're basically pretending like you're looking like a dead bug when their extremities are extended upward. So, and from that position, you're keeping a nice neutral spine, tall from the neck down to the tailbone. And one basic movement pattern to perform in doing a dead bug is having your arm and opposite leg. So it might be my right arm and my left leg extending down towards the floor while I keep my left arm and my right leg still vertical, pointing up at the ceiling. So I'm going to extend my arm and opposite leg down to the floor while keeping my spine nice and neutral. And the reason why that's undervalued is, well, for one, a lot of times it's been categorized as a physical therapy exercise, something that you'll do if you have low back pain, or if you're coming back from, let's say, shoulder surgery or some kind of hip injury, to where we're now trying to re-educate spinal stability. So while keeping the spine nice and still, we're now changing the demand on the core by extending the arm and the opposite leg down to the ground while we maintain that same static posture from neck down to the tailbone. And the reason why, I mean, it's an undervalued exercise. I think for one, it's been pigeonholed as a physical therapy exercise, something you're only going to do when you're hurt or you're deconditioned and done only in that context. But Wendy, I don't know about you, but I use the dead bug and variations of that exercise with all of my clients.
100%. And people think, well, that's got to be easy. You're laying on your back and you're just moving your extremities. First of all, it carries over into everyday activities because we move in a contralateral way, right? When I step forward, my left arm swings. And so I get what I train for. We've talked about that in multiple episodes. And so if I move that way and now I start exercising that way, I'm ensuring quality movement patterns in a contralateral, making sure that my left arm is working with my right hip and everything is working the way that it was intended to work. we talk about different subsystems, but just to keep it basic, we move that way. We want to train that way, but you can load it. You can use a cable to pull down and bring back. You can use super bands. It doesn't have to be just your body weight. However, if somebody can't do it with no weight and they start arching their back and they can't maintain that stability in the stable spine, then they're doing it incorrectly. And you really want to focus and teach that maneuver, because you're only as strong as you are stable. Plus, by maintaining neutral and moving your limbs, you're automatically activating the core musculature, which there's approximately 29 muscles just there, not including the actual limbs that you're moving along with that. So you definitely are working more muscles. That's why I think it's highly undervalued, because your core muscles are keeping your spine stable. And we want a stable spine. We need it to be stable. We need every little muscle to protect the vertebrae, so we don't have these ruptured discs in what am I looking for? Ruptured disc, the compressed. Thank you. Got it myself.
I was wondering what this was.
One of these, I would figure it out in a second. Compressed discs, or some kind of issue with the spine.
Yep. Great exercise. Very definitely undervalued. That would be the equivalent of signing a player for the league minimum, and they are the one that gets on base the most on your team.
Or so, Tom Brady, if we want to switch. Look at that.
If you go to Mr. Irrelevant, or today, Brock Purdy. So, well, being in the Bay Area, you know, the big name here is Brock Purdy. When it comes to Mr. Irrelevant, actually, Tom Brady's from the Bay Area too. So
he was the last choice and became one of the best quarterbacks with Peyton Manning ever. And so I have to throw that out there. All right, so let's move on. Let me ask you this question, because I have my thoughts.
All right.
Do you think it's overvalued or undervalued? A heavy barbell squat. Go.
Overvalued.
Oh, yes.
Overvalued from the standpoint that putting the bar on your back, right? No doubt you're going to use, if you go heavy, you're going to use every fiber of your being to squat down and then stand back up. However, with that exercise, if I put the bar on my back, which means I've got this however many hundreds of pounds sitting right on my cervical spine, on my traps, right? From there, I've got to have the flexibility to externally rotate my shoulders so I can get a good hold, unless you've got a manta bar or something that allows you to hold on to the bar, secure it with your arms in front. But in the case that you don't, it's back here. Well, if my shoulders are a little tight in external rotation, getting into external rotation, my arm and my hands are going to be forward, which is only going to push me farther forward, right? So there's two things in play already. One, I'm loading my spine directly. I've got a bar directly right on my center mass, right up here, right in the traps, if not against my bone. And then I have my shoulders, they have to commit to this range of motion, right? And if they don't, it's going to push me forward, my hands forward, my head, neck, and shoulders forward, which now puts me into even more of a forward head position. So from those two vantage points, for it to get a lot of selection, if you will, in the weight room, especially high school, college, in my experience, Wendy, not a whole lot of pro strength coaches will axially load the spine. So my thought is, if they're not doing it at the professional level, why should you do it at any level below that?
100%. Today on Random Fit, we're talking Moneyball for fitness with myself, Wendy Batts, and Ken Miller. And Ken, you make a great point about the heavy barbell on your back. Now, people are going to say, but this is a great exercise and I love it. My question is why? Well, it really works my quads. Perfect. Well, it's supposed to be for your quads and your glutes. So if you're feeling a lot of your quads, are you also feeling your glutes? These work hand in hand when you do a squat. Same reasons why I don't like it. We don't use it with any of our players unless we have to and provide a number. It's a little bit different in football, but when we're looking at basketball, tennis, some of these other sports that I'm working with, there's no need for that. There's no carryover to what they need. We need mobility and flexibility and strength and power, obviously, with tennis, but there's other way of going about it. And I think it's very important too to think when we're working with the athlete or client or even yourself, why are you doing it? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And are there other alternatives to get the same muscles to be your prime movers with maybe less load on that spine? And that the spine, we see there's over 80% of the population at one point or who have already had spine issues, low back pain, all of it. So we can avoid it by just making smarter choices. And one of the exercises that I think is important to bring up now that is super undervalued is something just a single leg balance with reach. That single leg squat. If you need to do a squat, do a single leg squat. See where your right side is and compare it to your left side. Do you have the same stability on both feet? What do your arches do? What's your alignment like? You learn so much more sometimes when you reduce the weight and you have to really kind of look at yourself, especially when you're doing one side over the other.
And even a little hybrid movement between what we're just talking about with the back squat and what you just brought up with the single leg balance work is the rear foot elevated split squat. So yeah, just to offset that, you still have a majority of your weight on that foot that's on the ground, where the other leg is extended behind you, maybe on a bench or maybe on a plyo box. But other variations of being on one leg or a variation of one leg with that staggered stance is another great option if we're trying to look for quad glute strength, stability, challenging a body position that if you're athletic, you're not really going to go down and up with 2 feet bilaterally set, just evenly set right next to each other. Your feet are going to be offset. Your feet are going to be staggered. So giving the hips an opportunity to be able to react and learn how to be stable on one foot, and then to take that to a different level to where if we're doing the rear foot elevated split squat, now we can add a little bit of load and complement a little bit, best of both worlds.
I'm telling you, undervalued.
Yeah. Undervalued.
All right, let me ask you this one. So you have a player. He's a baseball player, and let's go back to Moneyball. You have a player that is really fast, like exceptionally fast. You look at his 40 time, you look at all these times, he's incredibly fast. He smokes everyone. He can outrun the team. Hands down, we need to recruit this guy. However, if he can't get to first base because he can't hit the ball, it doesn't matter how fast he is, right? So thinking of that analogy right there, if he doesn't make contact with the ball, he won't be running to first. Now, granted, I guess he could, sub in and run for someone else. All of that, yes, I get it. But I'm just saying, when you're looking at a team as a whole, you want them to be able to catch, bat, and run. 3 primary important things in baseball. So if they're missing one of those things, because conceptually, if he's fast, we can teach him how to hit. Well, let's look at this exercise that I think is overvalued, keeping that in mind. If you can't hit, but you can run, it's still a problem. Let's talk about sit-ups. If I crunch and do sit-ups for days, I'm going to lose my belly fat. That is not the case. You can do sit-ups for days, and you are not going to become less fat in that position. We can't spot treat and focus on one portion of the body. What ends up happening when you're actually doing a sit-up, if you don't have good stabilization and quality movement by doing the dead bugs and the planks and the exercises that we talked about to help the spine stay stable, then you start using your psoas more, which is a hip flexor that attaches to every one of your lumbar spine. And that's going to increase an arch in your back, which increases compression and causes discomfort in the lower back, while still not losing the fat around your abs. So what do you think about that, Ken?
I couldn't agree more. Well, from the vantage point, our mutual friend Lenny Parasino, one of the things he taught me early on in my career was the point that the muscle doesn't own the fat on top of it. So if I want to work on my abs, the abs, they have nothing, the rectus abdominis, let's just say, or the obliques, they don't own the fat that's on top of it. So I can work my abs all day long, but it's not the fat that's on top of the abs that the abdominals say, all right, because we worked out so much, you can go away. They don't own the fat that's on top of it. I don't know. Have you ever heard Lenny say that?
I have.
Yeah,
I love it. That's one of my favorites. And I will say too, doing a sit-up is important. It's an activity of daily living. And I teach all of my clients to do a proper sit-up, but when the time is right. So I do make sure that they're stable throughout NASM, throughout the OPT model, which is the concepts and methodology that Ken, you and I have used forever, what we always want to talk about. It's super important to understand you're only as strong as you are stable. So we need to get the spine stable first before we start adding flexion, extension, and different types of rotation safely. People can do it from the start, but what is the risk versus benefit? And so I love doing sit-ups. I feel they're very important for life, but they have to work themselves up to make sure that we are doing spinal flexion and not looking up towards the ceiling. I love that when they don't even bend the spine, they're just hip flexing and thinking that they're working their abs. And so really looking at form, technique, all of that is also important. And one of those that there are so many different ways to work the core and the abs. And the abs, they're not core. When you're talking about the core, we're talking everything from cervical to all of the lumbar, thoracic, all of that. Cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine make up your core. All those little muscles that attach to that area is your core, not just your abs.
I want to emphasize something that you said, Wendy, is the fact that it's not that we're saying that sit-ups aren't for everybody. You have to earn the right to do the sit-ups, because great exercise. If there's a demand in my sport or my activity where I have to flex, well, we got to flex. You flex when you rotate. So we just have to do other things first to make sure that we've done what we could to protect the spine. And again, stability first, strength and power next. So that's what I don't want to get lost in this information that we're sharing, is the fact that, hey, it's a good exercise if you can protect your spine. If your spine moves well, then we can perform strength-oriented movements like flexion, extension, and rotation. Once we teach you how to hold yourself still, and we're talking about the spine now, then we can do the other things. Then sit-ups has a place. But as the first choice, as the go-to, not so much. So I think if you're listening to us on Random Fit and Wendy Batts and I talking about Moneyball for fitness, then we just really need to look at, okay, well, what needs to happen first? Do that first, and then we can get the sit-up.
Chicken or the egg? Just kidding. All right. So Ken, let me ask you, what are your thoughts? I'm going to say it is completely undervalued, but what are your thoughts about plyometric exercises? And I'm not talking about just mountain climbing for a minute. I'm not talking about the burpees because you were late. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about true specific protocols for plyometric exercises mixed in throughout a workout, or even an extended warm-up.
Yeah, it's undervalued. A lot of times it only gets put into the conversation when we're talking about sports and athletics. But if you're in the health club, if you're in the gym environment where they're not really built for performance, like you don't see open runways where I can do broad jumps, lateral jumps, vertical jumps. So when we talk about plyometrics from the perspective of movement preparation, so you've worked on your mobility, you've activated those core muscles, and you've done some balance work. Now it's time to get the nervous system to upregulate and be excitable for whatever you do next, whether that's deliberate speed, agility, quickness, or resistance training. Plyometrics as a component of movement preparation, very, very, very much underrated. because there's been too many times I've had clients that they haven't jumped in years, decades even. But once we start getting them to move faster by jumping, forward, lateral, turn jumping, their life gets so much easier when the nervous system is excitable, when the nervous system knows how to coordinate the muscles, when you have to move quickly. And we're not talking about sprinting through the park or running a bunch of stairs as fast as you can. We're talking about being able to change platforms. Let's say by that I mean you may be walking on a sidewalk, but then you have to walk on grass. So your ability to react differently and respond to the changing environment, because your nervous system is that much more excitable, that much more reactive. Plyometrics, from the standpoint of learning landing mechanics and being able to turn on the nervous system and get the foot and ankle to react so that there isn't as high a risk for falling, that's where it goes as an undervalued, underrated component of the workout. So definitely not done enough.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think it's important to note what you said there. Stress the importance of landing mechanics. If we are landing and our feet are flat and we're jarring our spine and our back and our body every time because we don't know how to absorb that force, then we're actually taking a hard hit on the spine and all those discs that are in between each vertebrae. And so an example I've used in every workshop. So if you guys have listened to me present, you've heard me say this every single time, especially when we're talking about plyometrics. If I had an egg and I was going to throw it to you, Ken, if I'm going to throw you an egg and it's not a hard boiled egg, it's a raw egg. If you were going to catch that egg, what do? You cradle the egg, right? You take it and you cradle it because you don't want, if you just caught it with a flat hand, what ends up happening is you're wearing the egg and no longer cradling and catching an egg. There's a big difference. And that's the way you want to look at your body and your spine. You want to teach your body how to cradle that landing and absorb the force without the compression. So therefore we're saving our ability to do that. Plus, if you are going to work with athletes, or if you want to be your weekend warrior and increase your speed or increase whatever it is that you're trying to do, if you learn how to land correctly, you're also going to be able to produce more force quickly. And so you'll spend less time on the ground. So you're teaching yourself how to absorb force and then react to whatever. Plus, if you're trying to explain it to your client and they're not really buying this whole plyo thing, ask them, have they ever been on the road and the stoplight turns yellow? What do you have to do? In Atlanta, you better run because no one's paying attention. It's a ton of traffic. Everybody wants to get home. And it's like, if you're in the way, so be it. Most of the time, you just want to run. So it's really important to think about activities and make sure that your client can see why those are important, and then choosing the correct ones. It doesn't mean you have to do a depth jump. It doesn't mean you have to do something crazy. Start small, work your way up, and then challenge all three planes of motion. And they increase your heart rate, but they also are teaching you how to get ready for what's ahead.
Yep. Great thought there, Wendy. I think when it comes to Moneyball, I think we've framed it right when it comes to what's valuable, what needs to be there, and what's underappreciated and undervalued. So when you look at exercise selection and thinking about, is this really giving me the bang for my buck that this exercise should be giving me, then great, you're making a good selection. But if not, then think about, well, how can I manipulate these exercises or do a variation of those exercises so I'm getting a lot much more in return? Because like they did in Moneyball, they traded away the overvalued players to get somebody who may not have been seen in as good a light by their sabermetrics, how they evaluated the players, as much as they saw the value that another player might bring. So take that perspective when it comes to your workout program, your exercise selection. What can I trade away, and what's something I can get in return or put into my program in return? So Wendy, thanks for your insight when it comes to Moneyball for Fitness.
Yes. And if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, I'm telling you, they're great.
Go see it. Because, Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, great actors. Of course, Christopher Pratt. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Actors. They're great actors.
Great actors.
Okay. All right. So for those of you who have watched us on this episode of Random Fit, on our episode on Moneyball for Fitness, hopefully you got some insight and a different way of looking at how you look at exercises. So hopefully we've shed some light on that for you guys. So like, follow, subscribe, download, share, comment, let us know what you want us to talk about, and we will do that on a future episode. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.